Today's daf we're going to be learning is Chullin, daf Kaf Gimel. This is the daf for Shabbat. For some, it might be the second day of Shavuot as well. It's going to be for Shabbat, Shavuot, or Shabbat itself if you're in Israel. Okay, today's daf is going to get started with a question. We actually started at yesterday's daf, a question of Rabbi Zera. And today, basically until we get to the next Mishnah, which is very short, and we're going to learn just a little bit of that, a little bit of Gemara on that, is going to be these three questions Rabbi Zera asked, which are all incredibly similar. So the first question we have is somebody promises, I'm going to bring an olah, a korban olah, burnt offering from Tolim or Bnei Yonah, either or. And then they brought this bird that was in the in-between stage. Okay, so, mahu, do we say it's a suffix? And if it's a suffix, then no matter what, right? We don't know, is it old or young? So since we don't know, it doesn't really matter because we said we're going to bring either young or old, and that's included. Or is it its own entity? And to answer the question, Rava said, the fact that we brought this drasha before, min hatorim, or min b'nei Yonah, min means some and not all, comes to exclude this whole category of tchilat zihuv. Once it starts to turn golden, then that proves it's not a suffix. It must be a briyah, because we don't have a pasuk ever to say, oh, well, in case you're not sure what to do, we should go like this. That's just not the way it works. Pasukim don't come to deal with sfeikot, right? Sfeikot are that we read the pasuk, we don't know what it means. So that's what we assume. It means it's a briyah. To which the Gemara rejects it. And if you look in Rashi, Rashi says this. They don't really tell you this in words, but the drasha that we saw before is just what we call an asmachta. It's just a mnemonic. It's just a real way to remember things, okay? But it's not really a drasha. It's not that the Torah came to tell you this. And you could look at it as if maybe it's a suffix, okay? But ki itzrich kral lemiutin nirba v'ne'evad. The pasuk is coming for a different purpose, to exclude a nirba, bird that a human had sexual relations with the bird, or ne'evad, or it was used for idol worship. Okay, so to tell you these can't go on the altar. Now, why would you even think they could? First of all, we know by animals you can't use an animal that was nevad or worshipped as idols, or used as an idol, or nirba. So here's the thing. There's a catch here. There's a reason we need a pasuk to tell you that, because you might have thought maybe this doesn't apply to birds. Okay, the bottom line here is going to be, since mumim, blemishes, you might remember, there aren't blemishes. I'm going to teach you this all outside and then we'll read it, how exactly we get this, but blemishes are not an issue for birds. So you might have thought, now blemishes, we're talking about physical blemishes, like the same blemishes that apply to animals don't apply to birds, okay? Some people say there are certain things, like if it's really in bad shape, something severe is missing, then a bird will be a Baal Mum, but most of the blemishes are not relevant for birds. If those aren't relevant, then maybe the nirba and nevad aren't relevant either. You might have thought that. That's why we need a drasha to tell you that. And then they're basically going to say, min hatorim or min b'nei Yonah. From means not ones that were nirba or nevad. Again, used in sexual relations with a human or worshipped as idols. So here goes the Gemara. Why do we need a drasha to tell you this? Because you would have thought, there's a pasuk about the mumim. It says moshchatam bahem, okay, because there's something destroyed about them. Mumbam, there's a blemish in them. Now, this is a double language. They're obviously referring to two different things. A mum is always a physical blemish. So Tana Debei Rabbi Yishmael, the Tana in the house of Rabbi Yishmael taught, Kol makom shneimar hashchata, eino ele dvar ervav avodah zarah. When it says hashchata, the language of shachat, like in the word moshchatam, it always means idol worship or inappropriate sexual relations. So how do we know this? First we have to prove how we know it. Then we're going to say that word moshchatam means those two things. And then we're going to say, and those two things are compared to the mum because they appear in the same pasuk. And then we'll say, just like a mum doesn't apply to birds, then you would think that nirba and neva wouldn't apply to birds. And then we're going to say that's why you need the pasuk to tell you they do apply and you can't use them on the altar. So that's where we're going. But first we want to explain how hashchata means erva and how hashchata means avodah zarah. So, dvar erva dichtiv ki hishchit kol basar darko al haaretz. This is in the generation of the flood, in Bereshit, in the time of Noach, because they all destroyed darko al haaretz. When we talk about darko al haaretz, we usually mean sexual relations. So they had destroyed, they didn't have appropriate sexual relations. Avodah zarah dichtiv pen tashchitun va'asitam lachem pesach. Right, and I mean that right. Giloi arayot. People were sleeping with the wrong people. And kish avodah zarah dichtiv pen tashchitun va'asitam lachem pesach. Lest you should destroy and make a pesach. Okay, so this is right. We don't want you. Right, this is in Sefer Dvarim Perek Daled. Right, when you get to the land. So now they're going to say the word tashchitun here comes together with idols, destroying idols. So now we're going to say, right, pen tashchitun means that you'll destroy yourselves by making idols. So what do we have? Hashchata means giloi arayot, and it means avodah zarah. Kol shahamum posel bo, dvar erva v'avodah zarah poslim bo. So now we see it inside, what I told you before. Since moshchatam bahem mum bam, that's all two different phrases that are put together. If the mum disqualifies it, then dvar erva and avodah zarah disqualify it. Because she'ein hamum posel bo, but if you have a case where blemishes, physical blemishes, are not problematic, then you would think, this is all just what you would think, ein avodah zarah v'avodah zarah poslim bo. Then maybe all the other kind of blemishes of that the animal was used for inappropriate sexual relations or for idol worship would disqualify it, and therefore, and what would that be? Where don't blemishes apply? You see how they're building this step by step, even though I gave it to you all from the beginning. Hane ofot, and these birds, ho'il v'lo pasabu muma, birds don't get disqualified by blemishes. How do we know this? Tamar tamut uzachut bebehema, ve'in tamut v'zachut be'ofot. There's tamut is tam, that means perfection. There's perfect animals and not blemished animals. In animals, meaning for animals you have to use only non-blemished animals, and zichrut, for korban ola, burnt offerings, only male animals. But by birds, ein tamut v'zachrut be'ofot. In birds, it doesn't have to be perfect, could be blemished, and doesn't have to be male, it could be female. Okay, so for the burnt offering of the birds. So therefore, Ema, now we finally conclude the argument. Ema dvar erva v'avodah zarah nami lo lifsal behu. So maybe avodah zarah and erva would not disqualify them. Kamash malan. That's why we need the drasha mina torim umin b'nei hayonah to say can't use a nirba, can't use a nevad. And that's all to tell us. This was all to say the proof of Rava that we used on the previous daf to say, well, mina torim min b'nei hayonah comes to exclude tchilat zihuv shebezeh v'zeh shepasul. If they get to that in-between stage, they're disqualified, and that would prove that it's a bria. No, that's not really the right drasha. This is the right drasha. Okay, in other words, again, it's not that it was a wrong drasha. It said so in a braita, but it was just an asmachta ba'alma drasha. It was a drasha that just connected it to the pasuk, so you'd have a mnemonic, but it's not really what we darshan from the pasuk. Okay, second question of Rabbi Zera. So we're going to have 3 questions, all very similar. Now we're going to do the same thing we did with birds to sheep. Sheep have 3 stages as well. First stage of a sheep is called a keves. After the first year, for the next 30 days, first month, the 13th month of its life is called a palgas. From month 13 and on, it's called an ayil, a ram. So comes Rabbi Zera and asks the same question. By Rabbi Zera, Homer harei alai olat behema. You say, I'm going to bring a korban olah from an animal. Mina ayil or mina keves, and you say either an ayil, which is a ram, which is this right from month 13 and on, or mina keves, or from the sheep, which is under the age of 12 months. Vevi palgas, and then the person brought a palgas, the same exact question. Aliba de Rabbi Yochanan lo tibailach da'amar bria have. So now they're going to say, wait. According to Rabbi Yochanan, we know already Rabbi Yochanan thinks that a palgas is its own independent entity. It's called something else. It's in its own category. It's not safek, is it young, old? Okay, how do we know Rabbi Yochanan says this? We're basically going to say this question isn't according to Rabbi Yochanan, and then we're going to come back and say who is it according to and what exactly is his question. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, how do we know it's a bria? We're going to start with a Mishnah, and then we'll see what Rabbi Yochanan says about it. Ditnan. Hikrivo. What if you, anyway, now, if you said, I'm going to bring a ram, and then an ayil, right? And then you brought a palgas. So you're not allowed to bring a palgas if you said, I'm bringing a ram. Okay, it doesn't work. Or a keves, doesn't work. But if you did it anyway, and you brought a palgas, mevi alav, there's two issues now, okay? We're going to talk about it from two perspectives. One is, well, if you were supposed to bring an ayil, you were supposed to bring libations. So they say, mevi alav niske ayil. Now, if you remember, we learned this in Menachot. If you learned Menachot, there's different size libations for different korbanot. For the keves, for the young one, it's 1 isaron, 1/10 of an ephah, of solet, of the flour that they use for the mincha, with 3 log of wine and 3 log of oil, right? The oil goes with the solet. And then you pour a libation of wine. If it's an ayil, it's 2 esronim and 4 log of oil and wine. So now they say, well, when you bring this palgas, you bring the nisachim of the ram with it. Okay, so you said you're going to bring an ayil, you bring the palgas, so it comes with the libations of a ram, and ein olalo mizivcho, but it does not fulfill your obligation because you promised now. We don't know why, either because the palgas is its own independent entity, or because we don't know if your palgas is an ayil or a keves, and out of safek, well, you can't fulfill your obligation if it's a doubt. But here comes Rabbi Yochanan. It's going to be clear he holds it's a bria. Because Amar Rabbi Yochanan, how do we know you bring niske ayil? Now, there's 2 reasons why you can bring niske ayil. If we think that maybe it's a ram, maybe it's a sheep, we don't know, then we'll just be stringent and make you bring the higher amount. But that's not what Rabbi Yochanan says. Rabbi Yochanan says, Ola ayil, because when it talks about in the pasuk about how many libations you bring for the ram, the pasuk starts off with or for the ram. It's a bit of a weird way to start a pasuk with the word or. L'rabot et hapalgas. So the word or here comes to include another animal. What must it include? The palgas, those 12 months before it becomes a ram, are included in the fact that you bring the same libations. If you bring that ram, you're going to bring it with the palgas, you're going to bring it with the same libations as the ram. So it's obvious that Rabbi Yochanan thinks the fact that you need a pasuk to teach us, and it's not just because we don't know, maybe it's a ram, maybe it's a sheep, and therefore let's just be stringent and bring the higher amount, which we'll talk about. What if it's too much? We'll get there in a minute. But he obviously doesn't view it like that because he learns it from this pasuk. So he obviously thinks that it's a bria b'fnei atzma, and the drasha is, well, whether you bring an ayil, whether you bring a palgas, you're going to bring the libations of the same amount of libations you would bring for a ram. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's very obvious that if you said, I'm going to bring an ola from the ram or from the sheep, and you bring a palgas, it doesn't work because Rabbi Yochanan thinks it's a complete separate entity. But when Rabbi Zera asked the question, he asked it aliba de Barpada. He asked it according to Barpada, turning now to Amabet. What did Barpada say? And now the question is going to be, what did he mean when he said this? Damar maite umatne. According to Barpada, he says, listen, if you said you're going to bring a ram, what are you supposed to do? Okay, if you, let's say, bring a palgas instead. So, now remember, the Mishnah said, mevi niske ayil, and it doesn't fulfill your obligation. Okay, so he agrees with that. But what does he say about bringing the niske ayil? He says, you don't get it from that pasuk. Why are you going to bring the niske ayil? Because you're going to say like this. You're going to bring it and say it with a stipulation. Mi amrina. Now, what stipulation? Okay, so the basic stipulation would be, look, if it's a ram, then great. Here's my obligation for the ram. If it's a sheep, then I only need to bring 1 isaron and 3 log. But I brought 2 esronim and 4 log. So what do I say? The part that's supposed to go for the sheep goes for the sheep, and the rest is a voluntary mincha offering and libation. Okay, the extra wine also. Just goes as a libation. Okay? So now you've resolved your issue. Okay? But the question is this. When you make that stipulation, do you just do the 2 I said, which is the first option? Mi amrina ba'ayil v'keves matneh. You basically make a stipulation. Either it's an ayil and the whole thing goes to ma'al, or it's a sheep and most of it goes to the sheep, and some of it goes for voluntary offering. But bibria lo matneh. But you don't have option number 3. Is it, or if it's its own thing, then actually what would you have to say? Well, we'll see in a second, okay? O dilma, b'bria nami mane. Or perhaps you actually need to give a possibility that maybe it's a bria. And then you would say like this, damar, right? So you would say again, if it's an ayil, then the whole thing is for the ayil. If it's the sheep, right? This palgas. If it's a sheep, then everything, right? Then whatever goes for the sheep goes for the sheep. All the extra is voluntary offering. But option number 3 is to say ibriya have lehave kule nidava. If it's a bria and it doesn't need libations at all. Now he obviously doesn't hold by this drasha of Rabbi Yochanan. O lirabot, also the palgas. He doesn't think a palgas has libations because it just talks in the Torah about the keves, the ayil, and the par, which we didn't get to, but that wasn't relevant for us. But the point being, if it's right, maybe Barpad isn't sure if it's a suffix or a bria, and if it's possibly it's a bria, and we have to be concerned for that possibility, then we actually need to make a 3-way stipulation, not just a 2-pronged stipulation. And that question ends in teku, just like the other one, where in the end we don't have an answer. Third question of Rabbi Zera, which also is going to end in teku. By Rabbi Zera, Haomer harei alai lachmei toda min hachametz o min hamatzah ve'evi seor mahu. Okay, there's chametz, there's matzah, and there's seor. Seor is in the middle. Seor is the leavening agent. It's not yet fully chametz, but it's not really matzah anymore because it's more leavened. So the question is, where does that stand? Now, the question that he brings it in conjunction with is somebody who says, I'm going to bring breads of a toda, which we're going to explain in a very strange way right now, and then reject it. But let's just start with the first way they understand it. If you remember the lachmei toda, let's go back. Okay, if you learned menachot, then you might remember this. If not, then it's new. But if you want to bring a Thanksgiving offering, so you bring an animal, and with it you bring 40 loaves of bread. Now, I say bread, they're not really all bread. Most are matzah. 30 of them are matzah, 3 different types, 10 each, and 10 are challah, like are lechem, okay? Bread, they're leavened. So, what happens? Well, if I say lachmei toda, now, there's 10, 10, 10, 10, right? 30 matzah, 10 chametz. Now, if I say I'm bringing lachmei toda, the way they're understanding it right now is you're basically saying I'm bringing a unit of 10 of them. Okay, either the chametz ones or the matzah ones. And you don't say which type, you say either this or that, it doesn't matter. So basically it sounds like to fulfill your vow, you need to bring 10 loaves of either chametz or matzah. What if the loaves were seor? They were this in-between stage. Okay, now the Gemara is going to get into something that's quite confusing and kind of a question why they're doing it the way they're doing it. But there's a debate between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir about what stage of the procedure of making a dough is the stage that's called seor. So they're going to talk about 3 different stages, and the question is, what's the status of the dough in each stage? So the first is when the dough starts to pale in color, get pale. That's called safat panim. This is machloket in Psachim daf mem chet. Hichsifu panav, it starts to get pale. According to Rabbi Meir, that's already called seor. And we're going to have 2 machlokot. Rabbi Meir actually thinks that once it's called seor, if you eat it on Pesach, you get lashes. It's as if it's chametz, really, even though it's not. Okay, he treats it like chametz. Then there's stage 2. That's when it starts to crack a little and looks like it has antenna of a grasshopper. Okay, that is the stage where, according to Rabbi Meir, that's already chametz because that's beyond the seor stage. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that's seor. Before that, the Chsifu Panav, he calls that matzah still. He thinks the middle stage is actually Karnecha Gavim, that's the stage of seor. He also thinks, this is the second machloket, that you don't even get lashes if you eat seor. So even though he thinks it's a later stage, he actually thinks you don't even get lashes until it's chametz. It's going to be called chametz when? Stage number 3, when the dough is so cracked that the cracks start overlapping each other. Okay, that's what happens when the dough starts cracking. Okay. Those are the 3 stages. We're going to do is a bit of a mix and match of the 2 opinions, and you'll see in a minute. So they're going to basically, it's a little weird they're doing this, but they're anyway rejecting possibilities, so it shouldn't bother us too much. Seor deman, what are we talking about when we say seor? According to who? Is seor de Rabbi Meir, if it's the definition of Rabbi Meir, which is the early stages, seor already, li Rabbi Yehuda, but the law of Rabbi Yehuda, who Rabbi Yehuda is going to say, in other words, if you go with Rabbi Yehuda, are you going to get lashes or not? Well, of course, Rabbi Yehuda is not going to give you lashes for achsafat panim because he thinks matzah mal yatai. He thinks it's completely matzah. So we're taking Rabbi Meir on one and Rabbi Yehuda on the other debate. Again, they have a debate. What's the stage where it's called seor? And do you get lashes or not? Rabbi Yehuda obviously isn't going to obligate you. Forget about the fact he doesn't even obligate for seor, but he doesn't even think that stage is completely matzah. Rabbi Yehuda le Rabbi Meir, if you go with the definition of Rabbi Yehuda of seor, which is the middle stage, according to Rabbi Meir, well, chametzu, it's definitely chametz. So in other words, if you go with option number one, we're going to call the seor definitely chametz. If we're going to matzah. If we're going to go with option number two, we're going to call it definitely chametz. So there's no question there. Rabbi Meir le Rabbi Meir. Now, if you're going to go with Rabbi Meir's definition of seor, according to Rabbi Meir's law, now remember, what does Rabbi Meir say? You get lashes even at that early stage. Then midalake ale chametzu. If you're going to get lashes, then he obviously calls it chametz. So again, there's no question here. It's obviously that you brought seor, and you said either matzah or chametz. Well, that's chametz, so you're good. Ella, the question is obviously according to Rabbi Yehuda le Rabbi Yehuda, my. So now we're going to go with Rabbi Yehuda's definition of seor, which is that middle stage, and his ruling about it, which is you don't get lashes. If you don't get lashes, well then it's not really, right? That's the question. It's not really chametz then. If it was chametz, you would get lashes. So now the question is, why don't you get lashes according to this definition? And then how would that fit in? Would me bringing 10 loaves of seor count for chametz or matzah? Because is it either or? Same question as before. So now we'll read it inside. Sfeika have, is it a safek v'nafik mimanavshach? And you'll fulfill your vow by saying, I'm either going to bring 10 of those or 10 of, right, I'm either going to bring 10 of matzah or 10 of chametz. And this seor that I brought is either chametz or matzah. So either which way, I fulfill my obligation. O dilma briyahu v'lo nafik. Or do we say no? Seor is something that's not chametz, it's not matzah, and you promised to bring either chametz or matzah. You didn't bring either. You brought something else entirely. You don't fulfill your obligation. That's the question. But before we try to say we don't have an answer, they're going to say, but this question makes no sense. Because, and you might remember we learned this already, which is Ha'amar Rav Huna, not in this Masechet, but in Menachot, Ha'omer Harei alai lachmei todah, mevi todah v'lachma. If you say, I'm accepting upon myself to bring lachmei todah, the loaves of the Todah. And there's no such thing that you just bring loaves of the Todah to the Beit HaMikdash. What you obviously meant to say was, I'm bringing a korban Todah with its bread. So what are you obligated to bring? Not 10 loaves like we thought. You're obligated to bring a korban Todah, meaning an animal, and 40 loaves. So now, what's the problem? Well, let's say, okay, so you brought 10 of them were seor. Well, kevandi ichayv le betodah v'lachma, this, whether we say I fulfill my obligation or not, is irrelevant here. Because why? If we're not sure if it's or chametz, so you can't say, oh, I fulfill my obligation, mimanavshach, because I have to bring, now let's think about it. Korban Todah, I need 30 loaves of matzah and 10 loaves of chametz. So if I bring these 10 loaves and I don't know if they're chametz or matzah, I still in the end am going to have to bring 40 new loaves. Why? This didn't help me at all. Why is that? Because if it's chametz, and I fulfill my 10 of chametz, I have to bring 30 matzah. But if it's matzah, then I fulfilled 20, I need to bring 20 more of matzah and 10 of chametz. So either I have to bring 30 matzah and no chametz, or I have to bring 20 matzah and 1 chametz, 10 chametz. So either which way now, since I'm not sure which one, I have to bring 30 matzah and 10 chametz. So which in the end is the 40. So I've done absolutely nothing. So of course we can't say, oh, you fulfilled your obligation. I didn't fulfill anything. I didn't even remove 10 from my list of what I have to bring. So that can't possibly be what it's talking about. So they're going to try a different attempt to understand what this means. Lo tzricha de'amar, must be you said, harei alai chala. Okay, I'm bringing the 10 chalot here. Liftor todato shel ploni. It's for someone else's korban todah. And then I don't have to worry about bringing the others, and I could put these 10 towards someone else's korban todah. And that's the question. Did I fulfill my word by saying, I'm bringing this to exempt so-and-so from 10 of the loaves they need to bring? Am I exempt if I bring seor? To which the Gemara says that doesn't help. You didn't do anything. You didn't help exempt it from anything because same issue. Self, halo yada hai gavra, the person that you're doing it for doesn't know in the end, ichametzu deleite matzah. Was this chametz and then they bring matzah? Imatzu deleite chametz, or these were matzah and they bring chametz. So the person who you promised to exempt from their obligation, from at least 10 of the loaves, like lighten their load, you didn't lighten any load of them because they still have to bring 40 like we talked about just before. So, lo tzricha de lo amar liftol. We're going to say, I made a commitment. This is an interesting question. I made a commitment to bring 10 loaves for so-and-so. I didn't say to exempt them from their obligation. I just said I'm going to bring 10 of their lachmei todah. Comes Rabbi Zera and says, Meka gavra yedei nidro nafik, o lo nafik. Did this person, now when I promised to bring you 10, I didn't say I'm going to exempt you from anything. I just said I'm going to bring you 10 for your offering. Now in the end, I did bring you 10 for your offering. The fact that in the end it doesn't help you because you're going to still have to bring 40 more, maybe that's not my problem. I did what I said, right? That's the question. Did I do what I said or not? Now again, if we view it now we actually have a good question. If we view it as safek, then it's true it's not going to help you. Let's say I said I'm bringing it for you. It's not going to help you. You're still going to have to bring 40. But I did what I said. I brought you 10 things that in the end, well, since we don't know they're chametz or matzah, but I did say I was going to bring either chametz or matzah, and I did. I fulfilled my word. But it didn't help you, right? Or do we say this is not chametz or matzah, it's its own unique entity, and I actually didn't fulfill my vow at all? And that would be the question. And again, the Gemara ends with, Teiku, we don't have an answer. So I'm going to summarize this section because we just have a little bit more left and it's a completely different topic. What we saw was 3 questions. If you say I'm going to bring Torim or B'nai Yonah for a Korban Ola, or you say I'm going to bring Ola Behema from the Ayil or the Keves, and you bring, right, these were both really the same, you bring something from the in-between stage. Is it something new, its own entity and you didn't fulfill your obligation at all? Or do we view it as a safek and then basically we're going to say, well, either which way, you fulfilled your obligation. And then we did the same thing with this lachmei todah. It just took us a while till we figured out what was exactly the case. Because we thought you could just volunteer to bring 10, then we realized you really can't because you're always obligated to bring 40 anyway, and these 10 are not going to help you no matter what. But in the end, right, even if it's safek, but in the end we said, well, it's just I committed to bring for someone else lachmei todah for their korban, but without saying the words to exempt them from anything. And then the question is, did I fulfill my obligation or not? Okay, now we're moving on to para aduma and egla rufa, and the reason why we're here is because this has to do with Chullin. We're here because we just brought a Mishnah where the Tolim and the B'nai Yonah, right, Harei Halai, right, this goes back to the Mishnah before. There's 2 things, right, and they each have different criteria, right? What's true for one is not true for the other. So the age for the Torim is not the same age as the B'nai Yonah, and vice versa. Same thing with the way we kill the para aduma and kill the egla rufa, right? The egla rufa is a ceremony when somebody dies in between 2 cities. We measure, we find the closest city, right? We don't know who killed them. The elders of the closest city have to atone, and what they do is they go to a nachal etan, to kind of certain type of stream, and they break the back of the neck of the heifer, okay, the egla. Now, the para aduma is a red heifer, and that needs to be slaughtered. So the way we kill each one is different. We're going to slaughter the para aduma and break the back of the neck of the egla rufa. So kasher b'para pasul be'egla, kasher b'egla pasul b'para. What's good for one is not the valid way to do it for the other, and what's good for one is not the valid way to do it for the other, right? It's invalid if we use that method. Tanu Rabba, now we're going to do the exact same thing we did with the previous sugya, which is bring a braita, say what the Mishnah didn't say, which is the para you slaughter, the egla you do arifa, which is the way you call to break the back of the neck. Then they're going to suggest a kavachomer argument, okay? And so first they give us the background, then they're going to say exactly what the Mishnah said. One that's pasul for this is right, kasher for that, pasul for that, and then suggest why don't we make a kavachomer, and the next part of that, which is the explanation why, and then trying the kavachomer in the other direction, that we'll all see in the next daf. So para b'shchita kshera b'arifa psula. So para, you can do shchita, but you can't do arifa. And egla b'arifa kshera b'shchita psula. And the egla, you can break the back of its neck, or you have to, but you can't slaughter it. It will disqualify it. Nimtzet kasher b'para pasul be'egla, kasher be'egla pasul b'para. Exactly what we said. What do you see from here? What's good for one is invalid for the other. What's valid for the other one, right? The other one is invalid for the other. Utei para kshera b'arifa mikavachomer. Why don't you say a para? You can do arifa from a kavachomer argument. Uma egla shelo kshera b'shchita or kshera b'arifa. In egla, which you can't use shchita, so it's limited, and yet you can do arifa. It's more expanded. So para shel kshera b'shchita. Well, para is more expanded because you can even do shchita. Ein odin shel kshera b'arifa. Shouldn't you be allowed to use arifa also, breaking the back of the neck? And the Gemara as we see in the next daf, we'll see that when we learn together next, is going to bring a pasuk that proves that this is how we know it doesn't work this way. Because the pasuk tells you have to do it shchita and not arifah, as opposed to the kav chomer, which could have maybe led you to that reasoning. And with that, we finish today's daf, wishing everyone Chag Sameach, Shabbat Shalom, and Shavua Tov, depending on when you're listening.